Picture this. You are flying east from Moscow. You cross forests, rivers, rolling plains, and then you hit a wall, not a literal one, but a geographical one, the Ural Mountains. Beyond them lies Siberia. Siberia is enormous. We're talking about 13 million square kilometers, bigger than the entire United States and the European Union combined. It stretches from the Ural Mountains all the way to the Pacific Ocean. Nearly 10,000 kilometers of land, and yet barely anyone lives there. The entire population of Siberia is around 36 million people. That sounds like a lot, until you realize that's roughly the population of California, packed into an area 30 times its size. So the question is, why? Why is one of the largest pieces of land on Earth essentially empty? Today, we are going to answer that question. And the answer, as always with geography, is more fascinating than you'd expect. Let's start with the line itself. Let's start with the Ural Mountains, the traditional boundary between Europe and Asia. The Urals are not the most dramatic mountains in the world. They top out at about 1,900 meters, modest compared to the Alps or the Rockies. But their importance is not geological, it's demographic. To the west of the Urals, you have Moscow, St. Petersburg, and the densely populated heart of European Russia. To the east, emptiness on a scale that is almost incomprehensible. Here's a striking number. Roughly 78% of Russia's population lives west of the Urals, in a region that makes up only about 23% of the country's total land area. The remaining 77% of Russian land, mostly Siberia, is home to just 22% of the people. That is one of the most extreme population imbalances of any major country on Earth. But why? To understand it, we need to go through the main forces that shape where humans choose or are able to live. But why? Let's go through the reasons one by one. The most obvious reason, it is brutally cold. Let's start with the most obvious reason. Siberia is staggeringly cold. Not just cold in a wear a coat sense. We're talking about a place where average January temperatures in some regions drop below -40 degrees Celsius. That is -40 Fahrenheit, the point where the two scales actually meet. Yakutsk, one of the largest cities in Siberia, is considered the coldest major city on Earth. In winter, the air is so cold that your breath freezes before it leaves your mouth. Metal shatters. Car engines must run 24 hours a day or the oil freezes solid. Rubber tires crack like glass. The record low temperature ever recorded in Siberia? A mind-bending -71.2 degrees Celsius, -96 degrees Fahrenheit, in the village of Oymyakon, the coldest permanently inhabited place on Earth. Why is it so cold? Two things drive Siberia's extreme cold. First, continentality. Siberia is about as far from any ocean as you can get. Oceans moderate temperatures, they absorb heat in summer and release it in winter. But deep inside a continent, with no ocean buffering, temperatures swing wildly. Siberia bakes in summer and freezes to the bone in winter. Second, high-pressure systems. In winter, a massive high-pressure dome of cold air settles over Siberia. This traps frigid air near the surface and keeps it there for months. There's no wind to bring warmth. The cold just sits. Permafrost, the ground itself is frozen. Cold temperatures don't just affect the air, they affect the ground itself. Much of Siberia sits on permafrost, permanently frozen soil, in some places going down over a kilometer deep. Permafrost is not just inconvenient, it is a fundamental barrier to human activity. You cannot grow most crops in permafrost. You cannot build conventional roads because the freeze-thaw cycle will crack and buckle them every year. Buildings must be built on stilts. If they sit directly on the ground, the heat from inside the building melts the permafrost beneath it and the building sinks. In short, the land itself is actively hostile to human settlement. Now, here's where it gets paradoxical. Here is the great paradox of Siberia. It is one of the most resource-rich places on the planet, and yet one of the hardest to exploit. Siberia holds some of the world's largest reserves of natural gas, oil, coal, gold, and diamonds. Lake Baikal alone contains roughly 20% of all liquid freshwater on Earth. The forests of Siberia, the taiga, represent nearly a fifth of all the world's forests. So why doesn't that draw people in? Because extracting resources from a frozen, remote wilderness is extraordinarily expensive. Roads and railways must be built and constantly maintained across terrain that fights back every winter. Workers must be compensated, often extremely well, just to convince them to endure the conditions. The Soviet Union tried a different approach: forced labor. The infamous Gulag system sent millions of prisoners to Siberia to work in mines and construction projects. Many of Siberia's current cities were originally Gulag labor camps. But when the Soviet Union collapsed and the forced labor disappeared, many of these cities began to shrink. People left the moment they could. That tells you something important. When given a choice, humans don't choose Siberia. And that brings us to the next problem. One of the most fundamental requirements for dense human settlement is infrastructure: roads, railways, supply chains, hospitals, schools. And Siberia has almost none of it, relative to its size. The Trans-Siberian Railway, completed in 1916, was one of the great engineering feats in history. It connected Moscow to Vladivostok, nearly 10,000 kilometers of track across some of the most hostile terrain on Earth. It took 25 years to build. But a single railway line crossing millions of square kilometers is not infrastructure. It's a thread. Cities developed only where the railway stopped. Between those stops, emptiness. Building roads across Siberia presents unique challenges. The ground freezes and thaws each year, constantly buckling and cracking asphalt. Vast stretches of Siberia are accessible only by air, or in winter, by driving on frozen rivers. Yes, frozen rivers actually serve as roads in winter. They even have speed limits. Without roads, there's no trade. Without trade, there's no economy. Without an economy, there's no reason for people to come, and every reason to leave. To really understand this, we need to go back in time. The story of Siberia's settlement is really the story of Russian expansion, and it's a fascinating one. Indigenous peoples had lived in Siberia for tens of thousands of years. Yakuts, Evenks, Chuki, and dozens of other groups, perfectly adapted to the harsh environment. But their populations were small, suited to a subsistence lifestyle of hunting and reindeer herding. Russian expansion into Siberia began in earnest in the late 16th century, driven primarily by one thing: fur. In particular, sable, a small, incredibly valuable animal whose pelts were sometimes called soft gold. Fur was so valuable that it funded significant portions of the Russian state budget. Cossack explorers and traders moved east with remarkable speed, establishing fortified outposts, called ostrogs, as they went. Within roughly 60 years, Russia had reached the Pacific. It was one of the fastest territorial expansions in history. But conquest is not the same as settlement. The Russians claimed Siberia. They never really filled it. Under the Tsars, Siberia became synonymous with punishment and exile. Criminals, political dissidents, and enemies of the state were sent east. Dostoevsky was exiled to Siberia. So were the Decembrists, the Bolsheviks. Even Stalin himself was exiled to Siberia twice before he came to power. This history of exile shaped the region's culture and reputation. Siberia was not a place you went to build a new life. It was a place you were sent when your old life was taken from you. Siberia is not alone in this. You might be wondering, are there other places like this? Enormous, resource-rich, largely empty? Yes, and the pattern is remarkably consistent. Canada's northern territories cover millions of square kilometers and hold fewer than 130,000 people. The reasons are almost identical to Siberia's: extreme cold, permafrost, no infrastructure, short growing seasons. Australia's interior, the outback, is a mirror image in heat rather than cold. Extreme temperatures, no water, no roads. In our previous video in this series, we explored how Australia is essentially a coastal nation clinging to the edges of a continent too harsh to inhabit. And in our video on the 100th meridian, we saw how even in the United States, a single invisible line, defined by rainfall, separates the fertile, populated east from the drier, sparser west. The pattern in all of these cases is the same. Humans cluster where life is easiest and avoid where it is hardest. We are rational animals, and we respond to geography. So what happens next? Here's where it gets interesting and a little unsettling. Climate change is warming the Arctic and subarctic regions at roughly twice the global average rate. Siberia is getting warmer. Permafrost is thawing. Growing seasons are getting longer. Some researchers have suggested that a warmer Siberia could eventually become more hospitable, perhaps supporting more agriculture, allowing easier construction, attracting more people. Russia has even launched initiatives to attract settlers to the Far East, offering free land to citizens who agree to develop it. But there's a darker side to this story. Thawing permafrost doesn't just make the ground softer. It releases massive amounts of methane, a greenhouse gas far more potent than carbon dioxide, that has been trapped in the frozen ground for thousands of years. This could create a feedback loop that accelerates global warming far beyond current projections. And the infrastructure built on permafrost, pipelines, buildings, roads, is starting to buckle and collapse as the ground beneath it shifts. Siberia's emptiness, in other words, may not last. But what fills it might not be people. So, let's bring it all together. So, why does no one live east of the Urals? Because Siberia is brutally cold. Because the ground itself is frozen. Because there are no roads. Because history treated it as a place of punishment, not opportunity. Because even with all its resources, the cost of being there outweighs the reward, at least for now. But perhaps the more profound insight is this: Siberia is not an anomaly. It is an extreme example of a pattern you see all over the world. Geography shapes where humans live, not just slightly, but fundamentally. The most powerful invisible force on Earth isn't politics or economics. It's the land itself. If you've watched our videos on the 100th meridian and the empty heart of Australia, you've now seen 3 versions of the same story playing out on 3 different continents. Next time, we're going to look at a 4th. If you found this interesting, please subscribe and leave a comment below. Which empty place do you want us to explore next?